Well, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. Now, today we're just going to do a quick little video about a quick little book. I'm going to be talking about H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. Now, I know I've talked about The Time Machine just a little bit before when I did my Foundations of Science Fiction video. I talked about H.G. Wells and The Time Machine. But I was thinking, you know, H.G. Wells, he's a pretty big deal. He is the father of science fiction, and he probably deserves a closer look. And I think The Time Machine probably deserves a closer look as well. Now, the first time I ever encountered H.G. Wells was in this book, this old beat-up book. This is 7 science fiction novels of H.G. Wells, and I stole this when I was a little kid from my stepfather. He kindly let me steal it. He was a nice guy, and I must never have intended to give it back because I put my little childhood signature in there in the book, and so yeah, I wasn't going to give this back. You know, my stepfather, he was cool. He let me get away with that, and has all of these great books in it, and I'm probably going to be talking about every one of those. But we're going to be starting today with The Time Machine, and this is my little Penguin English Library copy of The Time Machine. Time Machine been in public domain forever, so you can find like a gazillion copies, different editions of The Time Machine. It's free on Project Gutenberg. You have no excuse not to read it if you have not read it already. I'm assuming an awful lot of you have. It's one of those books that just about everybody who's interested in science fiction or fantasy seems to have read. And if you have not, it's tiny. You can get it for free. You have no excuse. Go read it. So with The Time Machine, not actually H.G. Wells' first foray into time travel. He wrote a short little story called The Chronic Argonauts before he wrote this, where he first gave his ideas about time travel. It's interesting. It's an interesting story to check out nowadays. Not a great story, especially by his standards, in my opinion. But, you know, again, if you want to check it out, it's free. Everything this guy wrote, it's free at Project Gutenberg. Pretty much everything he wrote is. And so if you're interested, you can check that out. But this is a great time travel story because it's so much more than just time travel. There's a lot in this teensy little book. It's a time travel story. It's an adventure story. It's a kind of lost world story that takes place in the future. It's full of big ideas that he packed into a tiny little book. And in it are our time traveler. We never learn what time traveler's name is, but he tells his story in this book. In the beginning, he's at a dinner party with a bunch of friends. He brings out this little tiny scale model of a time machine, and he sets it down on a table. He pushes the little lever, and boom, it's gone. And he explains that he has sent it into the future, and that it is traveling through time, and of course, nobody believes him. So he promptly goes to his laboratory after they've left, hops on his time machine, and bolts into the future. And he gets to the future, and it's like this pastoral place, and he's in front of this. In front of him, there's this big Sphinx statue that's kind of looming over him, and there's a bunch of interesting futuristic buildings that all seem to be kind of busted up and in disrepair. And once he's there, he meets the Eloi, and the Eloi are these little folks, these tiny little guys, this gentle, playful little group of people, and all they want to do is hang out and have fun and throw flowers at each other and occasionally drown in the river. You know, these kind of mellow flower children types. but they're basically useless. And it brings up the first question that we get in this, which is, okay, what's the deal with these guys? Where do they get their clothes? They're all eating fruit all the time. Where are they getting the fruit? Because they're completely useless, these guys. So it's like, where are they getting the necessities of life? That's the first question. And while the time traveler is meeting these folks, now he left his time machine over there by the Sphinx, right? He doesn't even have a bicycle lock, this guy. So he just leaves his time machine unlocked, sitting over there by the Sphinx. And of course, what happens to him is what happens to anybody. If you leave your time machine unlocked, someone's going to steal it. Someone stole his time machine. And so when he gets back, he freaks out. My time machine's gone. I'm stuck in this stupid future with these useless people. What do I do? So there is his first problem. The time traveler is in the future without his time machine. And another question, where'd my time machine go and who took my time machine? So he has to spend the night with these people. And at night, he discovers that these creepy, strange creatures are kind of crawling around out in the dark, and they're these white ape-like things. And they're horrible, ghastly creatures, which we learn are the Morlocks. And the Morlocks, they push this story right into horror story directions. So this story is not just science fiction, it's not just fantasy, it's also a horror story. Because these guys, they're terrible. The Morlocks are these vicious, awful creatures that live underground, and they're these scattered around in the area. There are these wells where if you peek down into the well, there are like these little ladders that go down, and if you listen, you can hear machinery going on down there, and that's where the Morlocks live. And they come up at night. Why? What are they up to, these Morlocks? Well, they're not up to anything good, let me tell you. Now, you've probably read this story, so you know what the Morlocks are up to. You probably know the whole thing. But just in case you haven't, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm not going to spoil this 100-something odd year story. I'm going to let you experience it for yourself, as you should. I will just say a few things. First of all, this story is really interesting, not just because of all the different genres that seem to be explored, for fantasy, science fiction, horror, all of which were not really a thing back then. But H.G. Wells is an ideas guy, and so he's trying to explore, it seems to me, in a fantastical way, the limits of what can happen, like a worst case scenario of what can happen eventually to his society. He lived in the Victorian society, and he's always speculating, okay, where are we going to go from here? He was always thinking about the future and his culture and his society and all the things that were wrong with it. And there were plenty of things wrong with his culture and his society, and he knew it, even though he was a product of it, and he was a part of it. And so he was speculating, okay, well, in the distant future, and this takes place way in the future, what are some of the things that can happen? And this is kind of a worst case scenario of what can happen to his society in the future, where basically both the Morlocks and the Eloi, these two kind of extremes, are both evolved from his current day humans. His great Victorian culture ended up in the crazy situation that's going on in this book. I mean, that's where he speculated this can go. And this book is full of social speculation. It's full of ideas about culture and where culture could go based on what he knew from his time. And it's really interesting. So there's a lot of really interesting things that you can get out of this tiny little book. I mean, it works as an adventure story perfectly. Every time you pick this up, every time I pick this up, I get that same kind of feeling of, going on an exciting, mysterious adventure. Even though I know everything that happens in this book, it still works, man. The magic, there's magic in this book, and the magic is still there every time I pick it up. And also on top of that, I get something new from it every time, just from the ideas that are in here. It makes you think, especially if you can project yourself back to his time. There's a lot of things to think about. And of course, there's just the horrific thrill of the Morlocks and the danger, and how is he going to get home? How is he going to get his time machine back? What is the secret of this society? There's just so much in this little story. So on the off chance that you haven't read it, please do yourself a favor. Read this book, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. And so H.G. Wells, like I said, wrote a ton of those science fiction type stories. Eventually he kind of stopped doing that, and he started writing books like this one. This is The New Machiavelli, where he takes a much closer look at his own time. He stops speculating about what if and fantasy in the future, and he starts getting more into his own culture, which is interesting in its own right. I don't know if I'll be tackling any of these on these videos. Probably won't anytime soon. I probably will eventually. I mean, you know me. I just keep talking. So yeah, I'll probably get to these eventually. They are interesting in their own way, although his first science fiction books, man, those were great. So yeah, Time Machine, check it out. Normally this is the point where I would see you again at stately Vaughan Manor. Not really true this time, because the next time I see you will not be from here. I have to go to the rustic Vaughan Lodge and take care of some business there. So for the next couple days, my videos will be coming from the rustic Vaughan Lodge. And so I will see you there at the lodge. All right, guys, have a great day.